When you know that you are queer, but your favorite drink is beer, that's gayish. You can bottom without stopping, but you can't stand going shopping, that's gayish. Oh, gayish, you're probably gayish. Well, life's just too short for narrow stereotypes, so it's gayish. We're also gayish. It's Gayish with Mike and Kyle.
Hello, everyone in the podcast universe. This is Gayish.
The podcast that can't believe... Hey, Mike.
Hey, Kyle.
Hey, shut up.
Oh.
It's my part still.
Shit.
Hey, Mike. I can't believe...
it's so
no,
hard.
No, shut your mouth.
Okay.
Hey, Mike.
Shut your whore mouth, Mike.
I can't believe we're not doing something 420 related for 420. Missed opportunity.
Can I talk now?
No. Let me muse on this for a little bit during the podcast, that section, for a little bit longer. Weed. Boy, it makes you feel good, but very hungry.
We are not high, I promise. I'm Mike Johnson.
I'm Kyle Gayish.
We're here to bridge the gap between sexuality and actuality, and today, again, not high.
Not high, just to clarify. Unfortunately, it would have been a good tie-in, but we didn't plan that far ahead.
We're being respectful of our guests.
Yes, sober for guests. We're going to talk about 420. Nope.
We're going to talk about Two-Spirit.
We're going to talk about Two-Spirit, yes.
Which... Yeah, we'll talk here in just a little bit. But first, a little bit of feedback, which I thought was interesting.
Okay.
This was on our Discord server, which if you didn't know, we have a Discord server. There's a shitload of weirdos on there, and it's a good time. It's a good community. Come join us.
Come hang out.
But it's from NYC Zomb, which I assume is New York City Zombie, after the Walking Fast episode, said, quote, "So I got to say, I disagree with Mike on this one.
Oh.
This is a stereotype that's good. Getting places quickly and efficiently is good. I hate having to deal with slow, meandering people on sidewalks. Yes, we are in a society, but then slow walkers should stay to one side so we fast walkers can get by. And I hate when groups spread out 5 times wide and walk slow so I can't get by. That pisses me off. Like these people aren't aware of others or how they are affecting them. So I'm sorry, Mike, you're wrong in this. Here in NYC, we have places to be."
Yeah. I think the implication here, not directly stated, but Kyle is right. That was the underlying implication.
I just think that it is being upset at humans humaning is spitting in the wind or pissing in the wind. Depends on whether you're into that. But like, people are going to do that. So be mad or don't.
Mad. I choose mad.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. I choose to be mad. Get out of my fucking way.
Great. Excellent.
Someone was walking their dog, and it was 2 people and a dog, and between those 3 entities took up the whole fucking sidewalk. I had to like walk around the edge where you're not supposed to, where you don't really walk. It was so annoying.
You know what we should do is start selling rainbow wristbands that have a bike bell on them, so you can just ching ching on your left. I'm gay.
I really like that idea.
Yeah. Okay.
This could take us far.
Gayish branded rainbow bike horns.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. check the merch store, everybody.
No, don't. It's not going to be there.
It's not going to be there.
Maybe for our 8th birthday, which is coming up.
Ooh.
The other thing is up at the top of the show. That's a feedback and corrections section. But I want to announce that we have selected cities and dates, and I'm still ironing out the details with the venues. So stay tuned for that. And the links for purchasing tickets are not ready yet. But
for our book tour.
For our book tour. Hey, everybody. Hey, Kyle.
Hey, Mike.
We wrote a book.
It's
coming out.
And it's coming out this month.
And good thing we're already out.
We're out, and we're just added one more thing to the list.
Yep. So just in case you're in or nearby any of these cities and want to plan a weekend where you get to see us.
Yeah.
That's so weird.
Yeah, it's fun. No, it was a lot of fun when we did it before. We're going to do another live show tour, and it's a blast having everyone out.
Here are the dates and cities. I'm going to say a bunch of Saturdays, and we might end up having to do a Friday night. We might have to end up doing a Sunday brunch thing. I'm just letting you know which weekend it is.
Okay.
So here they come. Okay, so we're having a book release party in Seattle on February 8th. And then we will be in Atlanta on February 22nd. We'll be in Chicago, Illinois on March 8th. Then we'll be in Washington, D.C., March 22nd. San Francisco, California, April the 5th. And we will round out this little tour in Dallas, Texas on April 19th. Mark your calendars, or as Big Fatty would say, mark your marking calendars.
Sure.
Marking calendars.
Mm-hmm.
Because we're coming to your town.
Yeah.
Or if you're nearby and want to commute in.
Yeah. Yeah. Especially Dallas folks. You can come in from Houston or Austin and come see us still.
Yep.
Yeah.
Do it.
We're really excited about this live show tour. We're really, really excited for y'all to read our book. And more details forthcoming on like venues and exact dates and stuff.
Yeah. Also, glad to be going back to Chicago.
Yeah. Can't wait. I will not be drinking Malort or whatever.
Malort?
Malort.
Oh.
Yeah.
I mean,
got that experience once and don't need it again.
I'm really susceptible to a dare.
So, I mean,
we'll see.
If I were dared, maybe.
Okay.
I don't know. Yeah.
All right. Well, look forward to that and hearing about it every episode.
Yeah.
Until we're done. You get to be annoyed by that.
Yeah.
Gayish.
Gayish.
Okay. And now the news.
Shut your mouth hole. It's time for your ear holes. News.
What's that heavy sigh for, Mike?
The fucking furnace that people said they couldn't hear, but it is. I don't know how you can't hear that. It is like oppressive.
It's not that bad.
Okay. Well, news the first.
Great.
So there was a horrific attack at a New Year's celebration in New Orleans, Louisiana, and a driver ran into a crowd of people on Bourbon Street, killed 14 and injured at least 35 others. And so, of course, Republican Majority Leader in the House, Steve Scalise, Representative Steve Scalise, says that the whole thing should be blamed on, quote, the DEI movement and wokeness.
Of course. How are we connecting these two unrelated things?
Well, yeah. So he was on the WWL First News with Tommy Tucker. That's not a name. It's a podcast to discuss the attack. And he said that, quote, some of these agencies have gotten so wrapped up in the DEI movement, they've lost track of security measures.
So we're so distracted by DEI initiatives that we can't keep venues secure anymore.
Exactly right.
Jesus Christ, that's a stretch. And I know stretching.
The FBI is so busy being woke that they forget to track terrorists.
Right. Jesus Christ.
Quote, call it wokeness, call it whatever you want, but where their main focus is on diversity and inclusion as opposed to security, and they're two very different things, and we've got to get back to that core mission. And this happened in the Department of Defense as well, as we've pointed out in the DOD, we pointed out in Homeland, we pointed out in the FBI. And so, if nothing else, let's get back to these agencies focused on keeping Americans safe, period.
Wow.
Period. So, I have an announcement, Kyle.
What's that?
The first 2025 Dickbag Fuckface Asshole Award nominee, U.S. Representative Steve Scalise, is now a nominee. Mark it down, Derek.
Put it on the list.
He thumbs up my butt, so it's happening. Also, when he was pressed for details, he didn't provide any.
That's always what it's like. Elaborate on that. And it's like, no, prove that these things are related. No, I can just say whatever I want because nothing has any consequences. And I can just pretend I can blame everything on the word woke. I don't really understand what woke means, but I'm just going to blame everything on people being woke.
Yep. Kyle, how long do you think they're going to let us stay on the air?
They're going to create. We don't have any DEI initiatives.
That's true.
We should create a DEI department.
We're explicitly against hiring straight people.
That's true.
We don't want that kind of diversity in our lives.
Yeah.
Although we are all white, which is maybe bad.
Yeah.
But okay, news the second. Moving quickly on.
Sure.
On Wednesday, Republicans unveiled their first rules package as part of the organization of the new upcoming Congress.
Unveil that package.
Yep. And dickbag fuckface asshole runner-up Mike Johnson, I don't even know if that's true, but I'm going to say it anyway, has made it clear in the draft of the rules that Republicans' number one priority is going to be trans people.
Jesus Christ. I mean, of course, shouldn't be a surprise, but
Which let's juxtapose that with the last story, right?
yeah.
Who's too focused on DEI and wokeness now?
Yeah.
You all are. You're
Yeah.
too focused on dismantling it. You're going to you're the ones that are going to hurt everything by letting something slip through the goalie because you're paying too much attention to everybody's genitals.
Yeah.
Fuckers. Oh, I'm so mad. Now what they're planning to do is in that rules package that includes this statement. So the bill, as of yet unnumbered, but a bill, a draft of a bill, quote, to amend the Education Amendments of 1972 to provide that for purposes of determining compliance with Title IX of such act in athletics, sex shall be recognized based solely on a person's reproductive biology and genetics at birth. So
they really do want to check all your genitals to make sure you're the right sex before signing up for a sport.
Yeah, and quite famously, the Title IX has lately been used to make the argument that, especially for gay people, a lot of what it boils down to is sex discrimination, gender discrimination. That the only reason you're okay with a man and a woman being married, but not a dude and a dude being married, is because of the gender of one of the people that's involved.
Right.
That's protected under Title IX, and therefore the federal government has no business in discriminating against a same-sex marriage because that's just gender discrimination on its face.
Right.
And the courts have agreed with that for the most part. This specifically undoes that. There are a whole bunch of protections that we get, gay and trans people, LGBT, the whole community, because of Title IX and this idea that it really is sex discrimination. And this, if it's successful, would be stripped away. Now it has to get through the Senate, no matter what they do, and that means that we would need 40 Democratic senators to filibuster, which it's conceivable that we have the numbers there if Democrats are willing to hold strong on that. And it sort of depends on whether they're going to circle the wagons around our community or not.
Yeah, I mean, it seems like with Joe Biden citing that bill, that military bill that like slipped through some anti-trans shit, it doesn't seem like Democrats are willing to stand up for Democrats as a whole, as a unit, are not going to be the ones to stand up for our community and block things like this. So I don't have a lot of faith in the Democrats.
I don't either, and that's unfortunate.
Yeah.
The hits just keep on coming, Kyle.
Yeah, everything's bad and you should feel bad today.
Excellent. I do think things are going to get worse before they get better, and I'm so sorry. Everybody buckle up.
Yeah.
If you need a shoulder to cry on, I'll try.
Yeah.
But I'm only one dude. News the last.
Great.
Squirt.org.
I already love this story.
The gay cruising and hookup app has unveiled their 2024 data about the sexual habits and preferences of their users.
Interesting.
And therefore has decided on America's best cities for tops and bottoms.
Oh my God, I can't wait for this.
Okay. Where do you think Seattle is going to sit? Like if you had to guess just based on like your subjective feeling about Seattle and what the rumors and where do you think
rumors are
come in?
lots of bottoms here. Bottom heavy.
Okay. All right.
And I would say like top is going to be like New York.
Okay. So
maybe Texas might have a lot of tops because everyone's a little bit homophobic.
So the two lists I'm going to go over are the top 5 cities in terms of tops that have the most tops.
Okay.
And then the top 5 cities that have the most bottoms.
Remember all the announcements Mike just made about where we're going on tour? Change that. Erase all of that. Our new cities that we're attending are the top list of tops.
Great. Okay.
What are they?
Number 5, most tops, Seattle. According to Squirt. Seattle has the 5th highest number of tops in the country.
Wow.
Number 4, most tops, Jacksonville, Florida.
Okay.
Which that's That a little bit checks in with your vibe there about Texas. Most tops, number 3, San Antonio, Texas.
Hey.
I don't. I mean, the picture that they chose was a dude wearing a harness and a pink cowboy hat.
Oh, cute.
He does not look like a top. Number 2, most tops, San Francisco, California.
Wow, San Francisco. Good for you.
And on the list.
We'll be there.
You're getting.
Oh, I can't wait.
And the number 1 city, most tops in the country. Everything is bigger and girthier in Texas. Is Dallas, Texas.
Dallas.
Which is,
also on the list.
Also on the list, Kyle.
Can't wait.
Great. And now let's do the top 5 for bottoms.
Okay.
Number 5, Portland, Oregon. Which that kind of explains how many Portlanders come up here to Seattle and how many Seattleites go down to Portland.
Oh.
Like, our communities are, there's some backwash there.
Sure.
There's some snowballing going on between Seattle and Portland. Most bottoms, number 4, Denver.
Oh.
I don't know.
So snowy, you got to get cozy, and
it just seems so like, I don't know, lumber sexual or something like that. I don't. Anyway, most bottoms, number 3, Atlanta, Georgia.
Hey, we'll be there.
We're gonna go there. That one surprises me, but that's just because I think of the South as being totes mask bra.
Yeah, for sure.
Number 2, most bottoms, Phoenix, Arizona. Which I've never been to before, but I liked part of the breakdown here. This is the Advocate's article about it. It said Phoenix had a record-breaking 113 days in a row with temperatures over 100 degrees Fahrenheit, which would make anyone want to lie down for a while. And the number 1 city in the United States with the most bottoms, Los Angeles, California.
Wow. We got either ends of the spectrum with LA and San Francisco.
Yep. So, I don't know.
Interesting.
Thanks, squirt.org. This is the hard-hitting news we needed.
Yes, I needed this as a reprieve from other horrible news going on.
Yep.
That's wonderful.
That's the news.
Speaking of things that are wonderful and a break from the horribleness of the news, I want to thank the following new Patreon member, Sean K. Yeah.
Special K?
Special Sean K. If you want ad-free episodes a day early, if you want bonus episodes and segments, if you want to use Mike's hole to say whatever you want him to say, as long as it's 100 words, then go to patreon.com/Gayish podcast.
Do it.
Do you want to talk about Two-Spirit?
Okay, Kyle.
Okay, Mike.
The thing about this episode that we're nailing is having someone on who is a member of the community we're going to talk about.
Yes, we don't always have on guests that represent the topic, but this one seems like particularly important to have someone on that knows what they're talking about.
Yes, absolutely. Because in looking into just like a little bit about this whole thing, it's become very clear that people don't actually know what Two-Spirit is.
Right.
Will inevitably fuck up talking about it. And I'm not afraid of fucking up, but on this one, I don't want to fuck up. So we're not going to fuck up.
It's like other topics we talk about are, like y'all hated when we did like cars or whatever, or like
You're
the
welcome.
theater or, like fashion.
That's our most reviled episode of all time.
But like, this is a community of people. So, hopefully by having a guest on, we will do better at not fucking it up by, they can speak to what their experience and what their definition and their,
So we're going to have Two-Spirit extraordinaire, Rebecca Nagle on the show. And she's going to get us all ironed out.
Yeah.
What do you want to know? What are you thinking about asking her?
I mean, I just want to know like her definition of Two-Spirit. Two-Spirit was created by a committee in, I believe, 1990 to represent kind of a vast array of different identities as each individual group of Native Americans has their own genders and sexuality names and stuff. So this is the like representation of all that through one committee. So I'm just curious to get her definition and what her experience is like. And she does a lot of cool stuff. She has hosted a podcast. Has a book. A Peabody Award nominated podcast, by the way, which is like, we just would never. So that's hugely impressive. She's a really impressive person. So I'm excited to learn more about some of her other projects as well, not just about the Two-Spirit topic.
I can't come up with a joke about someone peeing on my body fast enough. But that's the punch.
Okay, I got it.
Great.
What about you?
Yeah, I just want to understand it better. I think that I feel like the alphabet soup, you would see 2S, or people would say Two-Spirit more often, and that it's like taken a big step back in the last, I don't know, 5 years or so. Like I feel like I hear it less often, see it less often in the abbreviations. I want to sort of ask about that or test whether that's true or not, but mostly just really, really understand, like in as much as I can, what is the whole thing about, and what are the cultural contexts that we need to be aware of when we're talking about it. Yeah,
you're right that sometimes in LGBT you'll hear LGBTQIA2S, or sometimes people put it at the front 2S LGBTQ. So this is that 2S that you may have heard of. Yeah.
Well, we're going to take a break, and when we come back, we're going to have Two-Spirit extraordinaire Rebecca Nagle on.
Yeah.
Should we take a break?
Yeah, let's take a break.
Great. Break.
This is the part where Mike and Kyle take a break.
So are we back?
We're back.
We're back. We are here with Rebecca Nagle. Rebecca, thanks so much for being here.
Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah. So just right out of the gate, we talked about this a little bit at the top of the show. Two-Spirit is this thing that we hear a lot, but it seems hard to sort of pin down exactly what the concept is. You identify as Two-Spirit, is that correct?
Yep.
Can you say a little bit more about what that means to you, what the parameters are?
Yeah, totally. So I think the easiest way to explain what Two-Spirit is that it is an umbrella term for the LGBTQ plus Native community. And so it was created by some of our Native elders in the 90s. So anthropologists and people who, well, really white people who were talking about queer and trans folks, and particularly gay men and trans folks in literature and in anthropology, were using this derogatory word that was actually Prussian for prostitute. And so people wanted to reclaim that identity and reclaim the idea of, Native spaces to be LGBTQ. And so they created the term in the 90s. Today, people from all sorts of different tribes use the word. Here in the US and in Canada, there's an International Two-Spirit Society, and there are regional Two-Spirit groups that organize, everything from potlucks to powwows to gatherings. I'm on a board, actually, of an emerging nonprofit that's trying to be a Two-Spirit resource center, an advocacy group. So we're just getting off the ground. So that's exciting. I think one thing that's important to understand about the term is that it's an umbrella term. And I think most of the time people think, okay, like that's umbrella in terms of, gay, lesbian, bisexual. And it is in that way. But I think for Native people, the bigger umbrella is the diversity among our cultures and our tribes and our traditions. And so many tribes have their own word for what Two-Spirit represents, and even have their own traditions and cultures around, roles or norms around, traditionally how people in the LGBTQ community were seen. So, in Cherokee, which I'm a citizen of Cherokee Nation, some people are starting to use the word asegi, which is kind of basically like a translation of queer. And then people are also using noodle udanto, which is sort of like a translation of two-spirit. It's different spirited. I've also been told by an elder that he remembers his grandparents saying ayet ehi, which means like they live in the middle. So those are some of the terms in Cherokee. So but yeah, I think sometimes folks think that it means, gender nonconforming or trans, and that is definitely part of what two-spirit means, but it's not that specific.
It can maybe mean any or all of those things depending on the individual tradition then.
Yeah, I mean, it's not like there was, people talked about when they had this gathering of elders in the 90s, people talked about what some of the words in their own languages. And so the word two-spirit is informed by that. But it's not a traditional term, it's a modern term that's an umbrella term for the LGBT communities. And then people may have a totally different word in their language.
Yeah. And are there some traditions that have no word at all? Like, is it there's this problem, right? That we think white people can think of Native folks as being a monolith, and you're definitely not. And I'm just wondering how widespread is this concept of two-spirit from like tribe to tribe?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know that I could give like an overview, from working and being part of the two-spirit community, I mean, other natives and building community, I get to hear like bits and pieces when we share. And speaking of cultures where there's no word, there's not really words in Cherokee, or, what I've been told is that there weren't really words for things like gay or lesbian. And it was kind of like a non-issue, it wasn't like a specific identity marker. It was just sort of, that was the way they were. So, yeah, but I mean, in terms of like an overview of different tribes and their traditions, I don't think that I could give that.
Mm-hmm.
Do you give any pushback from other people when using the term two-spirit? Like, is that widely accepted, or do any people have any resistances to that phrasing?
No, I think generally what I see a lot of Native groups doing is using the term two-spirit and, indigiqueer or Native LGBTQ, because not everybody identifies as two-spirit. There are some traditions where actually like the term two-spirit means almost like, I don't know, like kind of like two-faced, it's like almost like has like a bad connotation to it. So some people prefer not to use it, or some people, I mean, we all know in the LGBTQ community that there are lots of different ways that people identify, and it's good to give space for people to use the language that works right for them. So some Native folks are going to use the word two-spirit. Some folks might just identify as, lesbian and Native, or gay and Native, or I've also heard people use the word indigiqueer, which I think is great.
Yeah, indigiqueer is a word that I just learned about when kind of doing some of the research for this. That's a newer word to me. Is that also a newer word for you? Has that been around for a while?
Honestly, I don't know the origins of indigiqueer. I've definitely been hearing it used more recently, but I don't know the origin story of it. What a clever person somewhere.
I wanted to ask too about being an umbrella term. Then, like pronouns. Like, are there? I just limit it to your culture, your tradition. I guess is there a they them implication there, or a separate set of pronouns for two-spirit folks, or is it all over the place? She, her, he, him, whatever fits. Can you talk about that space a little bit?
So in Cherokee, actually, our pronouns don't have any gender, which is also pretty common in other indigenous languages. Again, I couldn't give, like an overview or a taxonomy, but from speaking with other indigenous folks, that's not uncommon. And the other thing, like, Indigenous languages are just very different than English. And so it's not like the difference between like English and Spanish. It's a much, much bigger difference. And the way that the language is structured is really different. And so there's not, you don't label things the same way. I don't know. You talk more about what something does than what something is, if that makes sense, in Cherokee. So it is very different. So the way that gender does show up in Cherokee is, you know, there are words for like boy and girl and man and woman and things like that. But when you're just using pronouns, which are kind of pronouns, but also they're like a part of the verb. So like the verb and the pronoun are like the same word. But the words, like every verb says like who is doing the action and sometimes even who the action is being done to. And so I don't know, you know, there are actually 10 different types of pronouns in Cherokee. And so, you know, we have lots of different ways to even say like we. So there's like you and I, me and you two. There's me and another person, but I'm talking to you and I'm not including you. So we have like all these ways to talk about relationships that were significant enough to us for us to build a language around it. But gender was not one of them. So I think that that's pretty cool.
Does the fact that the gender isn't associated with pronouns, does that help? Does that leave it a little bit more open for people's gender to be what it is?
I mean, traditionally, it may have been. I think today, just talking about like contemporary Cherokee life in a practical way, one is that our language is endangered. And so the spaces where it's spoken are few and far between. And, you know, English is so dominant that I think, you know, contemporary Cherokee people, you know, have to navigate the world of pronouns because that's life, you know. But I like to think that like back in the day, you know, prior to colonization or even, you know, 100 or to 150 years ago where there were communities, I mean, even a generation ago, you know, there were communities where people were speaking in mostly Cherokee. And sadly, we're in a place where we haven't had kids growing up speaking Cherokee in about 40 years. And so we don't have those fully Cherokee language communities anymore, but we're trying to rebuild them, you know, through language nests and schools and things like that. So I think the shelter that a pronoun-free language could provide for, you know, like a trans young person today is, you know, not as much of a shelter as it would be if, you know, we hadn't dealt with the devastating consequences of U.S. policy that have, and the consequences that has had on our language.
Yeah. You mentioned the fact that the language is endangered. Do you feel like an obligation to try to maintain the language, or, you know, how do you combat kind of the danger that the language is under to not be around anymore?
Yeah, so and Cherokee's not alone. Actually, most indigenous languages in the United States are endangered and without intervention won't be spoken anymore. So most indigenous languages are in this place where the children of that tribe, it's not every tribe, but most tribes, the children aren't still growing up speaking the language. And that's a really, really dangerous place for a language to be. And so Cherokees are doing a lot, you know. I had the privilege to participate in an adult language immersion program through my tribe. We have an elementary immersion school. I have also had the privilege of volunteering with a really cool program called Little Cherokee Seeds, which puts little babies and their mamas in an immersive program with first language speakers. So we're trying to get babies growing up speaking Cherokee again for the first time in a few decades. And so there's all, you know, I mean, from language nests to schools to teaching books and apps to, you know, like dubbing Star Wars and Navajo or broadcasting, you know, a football tournament in Apache. Like, people are doing the work. I will say, like, one thing just to note is that resources for tribes to work on language revitalization are really, really scarce. And so there's a tiny little pot of federal funding that's competitive that not every tribe applies for gets. And it's this 3-year grant cycle where you have to come back and reapply. And 3 years is not enough time to rehabilitate a language. And in 2019, I actually did an article for High Country News where I looked at how much money the U.S. government had spent on boarding schools and how much it had spent in the modern era on language revitalization. And when adjusted for inflation, for every dollar the U.S. spent on boarding schools, it only spent 7 cents on language revitalization. So we have a lot of work to do, not just to lift up and celebrate the efforts of Indigenous people to revitalize languages, but I think also to think about that justice component of what resources are really owed to Native communities who are doing this work because of the legacy of U.S. policy.
Do you foresee federal policies changing in an advantageous way over the next 4 years?
No.
Okay.
Yeah. I mean, there hasn't been, there was a little bit with the COVID money. There was some that was like, that went towards language revitalization at a federal level, but there hasn't been a big push there. I mean, there is money through the Administration for Native Americans. So there is money through ANA for language revitalization, but everyone you talk to will say that it's not enough.
That's wild to me that you said it's for 3 years, because you're right. Like to revitalize a language, like that's a giant long-term project, not a 3-year project to complete.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. You did mention a nonprofit that you were working on, a new nonprofit. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
So yeah, I'm on the board of an organization. It's in its infancy, so we're actually still like getting our paperwork together to be a 501c3 and in development. But it's called the Two-Spirit and Native LGBTQ Plus Center for Equity, and we're really hoping to be a national organization that can both be a voice and advocate for Two-Spirit people, and also be a resource center for our community members and for our grassroots community organizations. And so, when we surveyed Two-Spirit people nationally, we found that people, both urban and rural, are really looking for communities and for Two-Spirit specific resources, and that people have a lot of barriers, whether it's housing or healthcare. And I think too, we also can be, even just like what you were saying, like at the top, like, well, what is even Two-Spirit? I hear different things. There continues to be a lot of folks who are not Native talking about Two-Spirits and what it means. So we also kind of want to be an information hub and a clearinghouse so that there can be Two-Spirit people speaking for ourselves, since oftentimes we're sort of spoken about. So that's the goal of the center. And it was actually started, I've been part of it for a couple years, but there was this really amazing Native organization called SWIC, which is a coalition of tribally run domestic violence programs in Arizona that realized, that by focusing on women, that they were leaving out a really important part of the community in their outreach and in their services. And so they created an advisory board to think, like, how can we serve the Native LGBTQ community better? And out of that board came this need for a national organization. So, like I said, we're still in development, we're still growing, but we're hoping to do training and technical assistance, policy advocacy, and be that resource center. So yeah, if folks are interested, get in touch.
Awesome. You mentioned that a lot of times people speak about and for the Native LGBT community and Two-Spirit people. What are some of the things that people get wrong about it?
Yeah, I think sometimes people don't realize that, people think that there's sort of one tradition among Native tribes around, gender norms or gender roles or sexuality. And I think a lot of people don't realize that each tribe has their own tradition. I think too, and maybe this isn't something that people get wrong, but I think it's a pet peeve of mine, is that I think that sometimes, because there's so homophobia and transphobia are so deeply steeped in Western culture and have been around for so long. I think sometimes people look to indigenous cultures for an example of, a society without homophobia or society without transphobia. And what's happened is that those things were forced onto our communities in really violent ways, like boarding schools where kids were, physically abused and some even died. And so we're in that same process of unlearning homophobia and transphobia. And because it's layered with colonization, in some ways it's harder in our communities than in the mainstream. And so I think that's something that I get frustrated with when I see folks kind of grasping for indigenous cultures as sort of an affirmation, because as Native people, we don't even necessarily have that. And I think especially too, when there's that looking for affirmation in Native cultures without giving it back, without helping us rebuild what's been damaged or what's been taken. And so I always tell people, if you're looking for a culture, if you're of European descent and you're looking for a culture where it was okay to be trans, or where it was okay to be gay, or it was okay to be a woman and not be a housewife, go back to Europe. There are indigenous cultures there that have those traditions, and you might have to go further back in time, but they exist, And so I think, and so that's what I would say. And I think too, it's if you want to take wisdom from indigenous cultures or teachings or whatever, well, one often is whatever you're getting has been garbled and watered down and isn't the real teaching anyways, especially if you're getting it from the internet. And then two, it's instead of just taking those things, do it in good relationship where you're, building with people and investing in the communities that, you're wanting to learn from.
So if somebody has a little blip on their 23andMe, they shouldn't start trying to. No. Yeah, those genetic tests are garbage when it comes to identifying Native people. Yeah, and there's a scholar named Kim Tallbear who's written about this, but there's actually a lot of really good Native scholarship on why the genetic tests are really problematic. So yeah, if you've got something on your 23andMe, it doesn't mean anything.
We talk about stereotypes on this show, and talk about the different ways stereotypes come across for gay people, for lesbian people, for trans people. Are there any stereotypes of two-spirit people, whether true or not? When someone says two-spirit, are there some assumptions that come along with that that you can think of?
I think the biggest misconception is that it means gender nonconforming or trans, which, absolutely is included in the term, but isn't all that the term means. And so I think that's probably the biggest public misunderstanding. And then I think the second biggest thing is just that we're left out. I think that one of the ways that anti-Indigenous racism functions in the United States is through erasure. And so I think we're used to the kind of racism, or even just the kind of prejudice, as LGBTQ folks, that comes with that kind of, stereotyping and othering. But I think we don't think about the type of racism that function. We think about the type of racism and prejudice that functions through people being seen as other. But we don't often think about the type of racism that happens when people aren't seen at all. And I think that's how anti-Indigenous racism works, right? And so when you turn on your TV, when you turn on your radio, it's not that sometimes you are seeing bad portrayals of Native people and stereotypes, but for the most part, you're not seeing us at all. Mm-hmm. And there's this really great researcher named Dr. Stephanie Freiberg, and she's a sociologist. She's Tulalip, and she's really looked into this. And what she found was that in multiple research studies is that this lack of representation creates this really stubborn stereotype in people's minds that Native people are less real, like that we don't even exist anymore, and that we're less human. And so I think that's kind of a weird stereotype to confront. It's a really weird stereotype to confront as like a living person when people are like surprised. Like I'll run into non-Native people who are like literally surprised that they're meeting a Native person and that we still exist. It's fucking weird, but happens more than you would think. But yeah, I think that's the pervasive public misconception, and I think the best way that people can fight it is in within themselves. The way that might show up within themselves is to make sure that they're like watching film and television made by Native people, reading books by Native people, listening to songs, listening to podcasts. Like there's so much good Native shit right now. There's just so much good stuff. There's like no excuse not to be consuming it. And I think in terms of what you can do, not just to educate yourself, but to, make the world a better place is like in the ways, if you are a researcher, if you are a professor, if, whatever little space you have where you're influencing the world, is to include Native voices, in those things, So, so that's my shout out about Native erasure. But, I always tell people, it's like, just think about like where you get your news, like I listen to my news, and so just add Native news and Native voices, to your palette, to help fight that erasure. Because if you just sort of are plugged into the mainstream, you really can miss the content that we're putting out there.
Is there a good clearinghouse for that, or do you have a favorite show that you'd point people to? Yeah.
So a show that I listen to for like news is actually called Native American Calling, and it's a call-in show, and they have like talks about different things, and at the top of the show they do like Native news. And so it's just like 5 or 10 minutes of headlines, which is good. So I kind of listen to it the same way I listen to Democracy Now! If anybody listens to Democracy Now!, where it's like I always listen to the headlines and then sometimes I listen to the interviews, but just to know what's going on. ICT News, formerly Indian Country Today, is like an online website, and then they also have a newscast which you can get on YouTube and also on their site. Indian Collective is also a great, more leftist source for information. A couple podcasts that I really like. All My Relations is a really good, if you like sort of like conversational, chatty podcasts. All My Relations is really good. And then if you like more like documentary, investigative podcasts, I really like Stolen, by Connie Walker.
And speaking of podcasts, you have a Peabody nominated podcast called This Land. Can you tell us a little bit more about This Land?
Yeah, and you can also listen to This Land. So This Land is 2 seasons. The first season is about how a small town murder turned into a Supreme Court case that resulted in the largest restoration of tribal land in U.S. history. It's called McGirt v. Oklahoma. And it was also the topic of a book that I had that came out just this fall called By the Fire We Carry. That's out now. And then the second season of the podcast is about how some bad actors on the right were using Native kids and these custody battles over Native children as a ploy to try and destroy tribal sovereignty. And so it follows a different Supreme Court case and sort of shows the Trojan horse backdoor strategy to try and threaten tribes.
Wow.
I'm not quite sure how to ask this question, but I'll muddle through it. So I think sort of globally there has been this shift rightward towards authoritarianism and more right-wing regimes, and we're certainly experiencing that in the United States. And part of that seems to be that trans people have become sort of the whipping post, the wedge issue, the victims really of discourse. And is there a similar sort of I don't know, friction, tension, scapegoating of Two-Spirit folks, or are things more chill than that?
Yeah, I mean, I live in Oklahoma where there's like a lot of homophobia, and transphobia is always worse. Next Benedict was in Owasso, which is about an hour from where I live, who is a trans youth who committed suicide after being like really brutally beaten up at their school. And so yeah, I mean, it's, I don't see trans and LGBTQ folks being used in tribal politics in my tribe in that way. But it is definitely used that way in the state, And so, we live in a state that has laws around trans health and critical race, so-called critical race theory. And so it is, it is a really hostile environment. And I think that that's a really important dynamic to think about, because, Native folks who want to live on tribal land, not all tribes, but a lot of tribal land is in more rural and more conservative parts of the country. It's definitely true in Oklahoma. And so, I think that's like one of the hard dynamics, like in the small amount of work I've done, going out and talking to Two-Spirit people and kind of working with this organization. One of the stories we hear a lot is about people leaving their tribal communities and moving to the city because they need to find a place where they're accepted, but then are really vulnerable in urban places. And so there's a lot of work to be done. But I haven't seen the same kind of scapegoating that we saw happen with transphobia in the last national election in the United States, and that we've been seeing for years. And so, it just, I mean, to me personally, as a cis woman and as an ally, it just makes me really sad, because we've made such little progress. We got like a little bit of visibility of trans people and a little bit of people saying it was okay, and like we're already in the thick of the backlash. And so I think it's a sad time, and so it's just unfortunate that I think that we just don't, I don't know. I could go on. I think we spent a lot of time focused on, marriage equality and things like that. And not focused on, lifting up our whole community, and especially the most vulnerable members of our community. But that's my soapbox, and I'll leave it there.
Yeah. Yeah. I did want to ask, this is really just like tactical, I guess, but, can you have do you have gender markers on like tribal identification, and do you have more than two options?
Oh, honestly, I don't know, which is partially my cis privilege. Honestly, I don't know. I don't know if on my tribal ID card, if there's more than just male or female, but I'll ask. Actually, I have a friend on council. I'll ask. That's something that we should definitely do. Because I can use my ID card just the same way you would use a driver's license, like at an airport or somewhere like that.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, so then it probably has a gender marker on it. We're obsessed with gender markers. The TSA is going to insist, which is so weird, right? Like, why do we why do we need that at all? Like,
Yeah.
why does gender need to be on your identification at all?
But that's a good question. Yeah, that's a good question. That's my own privilege that I haven't ever thought of that.
Yeah, same.
I want to go back to when do you remember the first time you heard about Two-Spirit and when you were able to kind of come out to yourself and realize that was something that described you?
Oh, that's a good question. I don't know if this was like the first time, but in my 20s, there used to be this gathering that the East Coast Two-Spirit Society would put together. And I drove up in my truck from Baltimore. I think it was like a 3-hour drive or something like that. And yeah, it was the first time I was in a native LGBTQ specific space. It was the first time I had ever experienced that in my life. It was really powerful. It was really powerful and it was really healing. And I don't know if that's like the first time I heard the word or thought of the word, but it was the first time I think I didn't even know that I needed that kind of space. And I also didn't even think that it was like a thing I could have. You know, it's like those things that you don't even know you're missing it until you experience it. And so, yeah, it was really powerful.
Yeah.
I'm reminded of like the population chart that dickbag fuckface asshole Republicans like to throw around the internet of like, there's this explosion of trans people. It's a fad. And like, or we're more open about it and people have access to it as an option and are then able to explore it for themselves.
Yeah, absolutely.
And what was your coming out process like?
Oh, yeah, I mean, I think I started to realize I thought I was gay-ish in high school. So my first experiences with women in high school, but I dated men or boys too. And then I think in college actually was when I was like, oh, okay, yeah, I'm queer. This really fits. And I remember the first time it was in college, I like learned about the word queer, and that felt really true to me. So it was, yeah, I mean, it was sort of a slow process. And then I don't know that I like had a moment where I came out. I think with my family, it was gradual. I don't know. It's funny. There was, with my dad for a long time, and with my dad's side of the family for a long time, I was in kind of like a glass closet where like people knew that I was gay, but we just didn't talk about it, which is very like Midwestern Oklahoma, you know, like it's just, I don't know. When I moved back here, I was like, oh, damn, I forgot how this works. Like, it's okay to be gay, but you're not supposed to talk about it. And so there was this one time I was just on the phone with my dad and we were just like catching up, and I had like gone on a camping trip with a girlfriend, and I was like in my maybe like my mid-20s, and he like changed the subject, and I sent him this email that was basically just like, I don't know why it was an email, but I guess I couldn't, it was like before texting was popular, and like I needed to write it. I couldn't say it, but I was basically just like, I'm gay. You know that I'm gay. I know that you know that I'm gay. Like, we all know I'm gay. And I was like, if you want to be in my life, like, you have to be okay with this. And he called me, I'll never forget. It was so cute. He was like, I'm cool. I'm cool with it, Rebecca. I'm down with you being gay. And I was like, oh, Dad. So yeah, so that's my probably the closest thing I have to a coming out story. But I mean, you know, it was like, I grew up, like, I remember people saying really homophobic stuff at church when I was a kid, like talking about how, you know, like they didn't want gay people around their children, all that stuff. And so, and then I sort of escaped to the East Coast in college, and then was like in a place where it felt fine. And so, you know, I think it was just a process, you know, and wherever, you know, if you're listening, wherever you are in that process is fine. You know, it's not something, you know, it's something that can take time. It's something that can be quick, you know, whatever works for the person is what's right.
So you went to the East Coast and went to school. What brought you back?
Oh, that's a good question. I mean, I wanted to be closer to a few different things: family, my tribe. So yeah, I was actually looking for jobs in Tulsa, which is a city about an hour from where I live. And then I got a job working for my tribe in Tahlequah. So that's how I ended up here. And I really like it. So I stayed.
What kind of work do you do with your tribe?
I was doing language revitalization stuff. I don't work there anymore. So I do journalism full time now.
Oh, awesome.
Yeah.
Very, very cool.
If you could give advice to anyone who is Native or Two-Spirit or feels like they're, some kind of LGBT, what advice would you give them?
What I would say is just that whatever your relationship is with your tribe, with your ceremonial community, with your family, that the injury that has cut us out of our communities and of our rightful place in our communities hurts not just us, but hurts our whole community. Our communities aren't whole without everybody. And they used to be that way, right? And so when we do this work of living in our truths, we're part of that healing process. We're part of that healing process. And a lot of times I've heard elders talk about how we're completing the circle, and that if we're missing from that circle is not complete. And so wherever you're at and whatever you're doing, living in your truth is part of that healing process, not just for yourself, but for all of us.
That's beautiful.
Yeah, that's really nice.
Yeah.
Okay, Kyle. Should we take a break?
Yeah, let's take a break.
Okay, let's take a break.
This is the part where Mike and Kyle take a break.
So are we back?
We're back.
We're back.
We're going to do our Gayest and Straightest.
We're going to do our Gayest and Straightest, but first, Rebecca Nagle, if people want to find out more about you, what you're up to, things you care about, tell us all the things.
Yeah, to get into my work, you can listen to the podcast This Land, wherever you get your podcasts, and you can read my new book, By the Fire We Carry, The Generations-Long Fight for Justice on Native Land. You can also listen to it. There's the audiobook, and I got to narrate it. So yeah, check those things out, or you can follow me on Twitter, Blue Sky, or Instagram, and it's just my name, Rebecca Nagle. But out in the world of amazing Native Two-Spirits, there are a couple people I wanted to plug. First of all, I love the book Post-Colonial Love Poem by Natalie Diaz. It's amazing, and you should check it out. There are some really hot lesbian love poems in there. And then there's this comic that I just found out about and obsessed with called Resbians by Carmen Salem. So those are a couple things to check out.
Awesome. Thank you. Well, our website is gayishpodcast.com.
We are on social media at Gayish Podcast.
Our hotline, you can send us text messages or leave us voicemails, especially if it's your Gayest or Straightest, is 5855-GAYISH. That's 585-542-9474. Standard rates apply.
Our email is gayishpodcast@gmail.com.
Our physical mailing address is Post Office Box 19882, Seattle, Washington, 98109.
Gayest and Straightest?
Yeah, let's do our Gayest and Straightest. Do you want me to go?
Yeah, go for it.
Okay, great. So the straightest thing about me this week is was at the bar with my very tall Scottish friends, and when we watched a football game, an American football game, and I was drinking beer. It was like, who am I? Why am I? What's going on?
Who was playing?
This is a great question, Kyle. I think it was St. Louis and San Francisco, but I'm just saying cities.
Sure. That's a plausible face off.
But the gayest thing about me this week is I felt so icked out by my straight activity that I came home and I watched like 2 hours of people singing Wicked songs, live covers of Wicked songs on YouTube.
Nice.
How about you?
My gayest is grooming my eyebrows.
Oh, okay.
I'm at the age where my eyebrows so some of them and enough of them get long enough that I have to trim them. So trimming eyebrow care, I feel like is kind of gay.
Yeah.
And
for a long time, Kyle, I would pull out the crazy ones and the gray or white ones, and then I realized that I couldn't. Just now I have to just the crazy ones, because if I was to pull, I would have no eyebrows.
Yeah, you don't want to completely pluck out every single eyebrow you have. Yeah, I get you.
Yay, getting older.
Yeah. My straightest is, I was waiting for the bus and I'm like kind of congested right now, so I spit. And I think just spitting outside where anyone can see you is kind of straight.
A non-Haktua spit.
Exactly.
Rebecca, how about you? What's your gayest and straightest?
I think the straightest thing about me right now is my love for throw and decorative pillows. They are in my house on every piece of furniture that could host a throw or a decorative pillow, and they're color coordinated. So
nice.
I feel like I'm cosplaying a housewife when I fleck them. And then, okay, so this isn't contemporary, this is past, but it's so that call where my dad was like, it's cool that you're gay. It's cool that you're gay. At the second thing he said on that call was, he was like, I'm thinking about getting rid of my pickup truck. Do you want it? And it was a little stick shift beige, sort of like lowrider pickup truck, very basic, like roll up the windows stuff. And I drove it until it got run over by a trash truck.
No.
I know, it was like the worst, slowest accident I've ever been in, because the trash truck was moving at like 2 miles per hour, but it was like so big it like crushed part of my car and it got totaled. But for a while, just to bring it full picture back to my dad, the gayest thing about me was driving my dad's old pickup truck.
That's amazing.
Yeah,
I love it.
He didn't even, I don't think he even got the lesbianness of it all when he offered.
There is something about lesbians and their vehicles. Like, it's just, it's a thing for sure.
Yeah. The other gayest thing about me is I do own a pair of Birkenstocks.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Oh,
but it's like the
classic.
foam kind. It's not the leather kind, but yeah.
Yeah.
They're really comfortable.
It qualifies. We'll take it.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Well, Rebecca Nagle, thank you so much for being on and talking to us about this world of Two-Spirit. We really appreciate all of your insights and your education.
Yeah. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, of course. And thank you to our super gap bridgers. Thank you to Locomotive, Simon Srirachi, Kaylee Adams, Kid Oliver, Kobe Gordon, Squoggle, Pip, Andrew Bugby, William Bryant, John Crowley, Yost Osel, Jonathan Montanius, Forrest Nail, Steve Douglas, Explosive Azania, Michael Covington, Just Jamie, Thomas B, Dusty Sands, A. Coleman, Chris Cacciatorians, and Jerome York. Thank you for your support.
Thank you for your money. That's it. This has been Gayish from the Chris Cacciatorian Studios. I'm Mike Johnson.
I'm Kyle Getz. Until next week, be butch, be fabulous, be you. See ya.
See you next week.
You didn't think you were thinking about making a joke and you decided against it.
I know. Vodka and gin, two spirits. That's Derek's joke. I just made it better.
Oh.